G'day, welcome back to MGUY and to this episode of MGUY News for Saturday the 11th of May 2024. So sometimes it's hard to work out what the environmentalists want because Tesla's building electric cars, but they're still protesting because maybe they realise that the environmental damage from making electric cars is actually far worse than we're being told. Hundreds of anti-Tesla protesters stormed Gigafactory in Germany. Tesla CEO Elon Musk downplayed the protests by pointing out it's National Protest Week in Germany. Hundreds of climate protesters upset with the environmental impact of Tesla's manufacturing plant in Grünheide, Germany, broke through a police line and stormed Europe's lone Gigafactory on Friday, according to several reports on social media. The protesters were stopped at a fence and failed to get inside the plant, though local German news outlet DW reports people were arrested. It's not yet clear how many. Protesters first opposed the Tesla plant just outside Berlin over the clearing of forests when it was first built back in 2020. Protests were renewed earlier this year when Tesla applied to clear 170 more acres to expand. We are here to draw attention to the Tesla factory in Grünheide for the environmental destruction here in Grünheide. Ole Becker, a spokesman for Disrupt Tesla, said on Friday, according to DW. But also for the environmental destruction in countries like Argentina or Bolivia, where lithium is mined that is needed for these batteries, and that causes terrible environmental destruction for the people there, but also for the environment, Becker continued. Yes, well, the environmental damage of building EV batteries is the industry's dirty little secret, which I hope will eventually be exposed. When you need 200 tons of earth to be moved to make a single EV battery, I think that tells you something about the environmental friendliness of building EV batteries. So the UK motor industry is clashing headfirst with reality as the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders downgrades its estimate for sales of EVs quite dramatically, which is a bit of a problem when you've got government quotas and targets to hit. UK Motor Trade slashes sales forecasts for electric cars. Private motorists continue to shun the zero-emission vehicle market in the absence of government incentives. The UK Motor Trade has sharply cut its forecast sales of electric cars this year as private motorists continue to shun the zero-emissions vehicle market. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, had forecast at the start of the year that 24% of all new cars registered would be zero-emission vehicles. That was above the government's target of 22% set out in the zero-emission vehicle mandate, which requires manufacturers to sell this proportion of zero-emissions vehicles or face potentially punitive fines. The SMMT now believes less than one-fifth, or 19.8% of new sales this year will be electric cars. Oh dear, how sad, never mind.
Oh dear, how sad, never mind.
The zero-emission vehicle mandate has already led to some manufacturers offering discounts. Notably, Stellantis, the company behind Vauxhall, Peugeot, Citroën and Fiat, slashed prices by up to 20% to boost sales and hit their targets. It's just carnage, basically, and it's going to get worse. So here's the ultra-woke Guardian's take on this story of EV sales tanking. Worried car makers call for urgent UK help to reignite waning interest in electric vehicles. Sector wants tax cuts, better buying incentives, and more electric charging points as sales in EVs stall. Yeah, that's right. They want more taxpayer money, in other words. Car manufacturers have called for urgent action to reignite the switch to electric vehicles after sales figures showed slowing demand among ordinary motorists for battery-powered cars. Yes, they're waking up. Yay. While overall UK registrations grew by 1% in April year-on-year to 134,000. The increase was caused by fleet sales. Of course it is, because they're the only ones that buy it. With private buyer sales down by almost 18% on last year. Manufacturers are alarmed by slowing sales growth in battery electric vehicles, which in the first 4 months of 2024 have only increased market share by 0.3% from the same period in 2023. To 15.7%, despite the rapid take-up in previous years. While the industry expects the figure to improve this year, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, said that BEV sales would be below government targets of 22% of all new cars and called for steps to re-enthuse buyers, including tax cuts, incentives and more chargers. Basically, just chuck a whole load more of taxpayer money at this problem to see if that'll fix it. Brilliant. It won't. And here we have two diametrically opposed stories about putting tariffs on Chinese EVs. Which one do you believe? Let me know in the comments. Biden to quadruple tariffs on Chinese EVs. Administration is preparing to announce higher levies on range of Chinese goods next week. The Biden administration is preparing to raise tariffs on clean energy goods from China in the coming days, with the levy on Chinese electric vehicles set to roughly quadruple, according to people familiar with the matter. Higher tariffs, which Biden administration officials are preparing to announce on Tuesday, will also hit critical minerals, solar goods and batteries sourced from China, according to the people. The decision comes at the end of a years-long review of tariffs imposed by former President Donald Trump on roughly $300 billion of goods from China. Officials are particularly focused on electric vehicles, and they are expected to raise the tariff rate to roughly 100% from 25%, according to the people. An additional 2.5% duty applies to all automobiles imported into the US. The existing 25% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles has so far effectively barred those models, often cheaper than Western-made cars, from the US market. Biden administration officials, automakers and some lawmakers worry that wouldn't be enough given the scale of Chinese manufacturing. So the problem you've got here is that people don't want to buy locally made US or European EVs because they're way too expensive. And now we're stopping them from even buying Chinese EVs because we're putting tariffs on it. And this next article exposes that gap clearly. BMW Mercedes against EU tariffs on Chinese EVs, say it could backfire. Although EU tariffs are supposed to support the auto industry, German automakers are saying no thanks. As the European Union investigates whether it should introduce import tariffs against Chinese EVs to protect its local manufacturers, Germany's BMW and Mercedes say they are against the move, arguing that it could backfire. In order to promote the growth of its domestic automotive manufacturing industry, China has offered generous subsidies to domestic companies making EVs and their batteries. Although the move has been successful, the nation's automakers are now building more vehicles than they can sell domestically, leading to fears that they will undercut European automakers and sell vehicles at an unmatchable price. However, BMW and Mercedes both operate manufacturing plants in China, and they argue that introducing import tariffs on Chinese-made cars and components could slow Europe's transition to electric vehicles. We don't think that our industry needs protection, BMW CEO Oliver Zipse said this week, per Reuters. There is no Green Deal in Europe without resources from China. Mercedes CEO Ola Kalinius agreed with Zipse, reiterating his opposition to restrictions on trade with China this week, Reuters reports. In fact, in the past, he has argued that the EU should reduce tariffs against the Asian country, not increase them. Well, you pays your money and you takes your choice. And finally, here's a story from Europe, which just goes to show the reality of how underpowered the electricity grids really are, despite all the bluster about how they will be able to cope with all these EVs with no problem at all. That's simply not true. As we can see from this article, charging stations in Gelderland go out in case of shortage on the power grid. In several municipalities in Gelderland and Utrecht, charging stations will soon be able to be switched off if the power grid is overloaded. The 191 charging stations will be managed by Park and Charge and will be grid-conscious charging. This means that less or no power goes to the poles when less power is available. Excellent. That's all you need when you turn up and you need to charge your car, and they're turned off. This is one of the first projects in the Netherlands where the charging stations are sometimes switched off. The province of Utrecht also announced this last month in order to spare the power grid at times when a lot of electricity is consumed. According to Park and Charge, turning off the charging stations from time to time does not have any adverse consequences for people who charge their cars. What? The electric driver is usually not bothered by this because the car is often at the charging station long enough to fully charge the battery. Electric cars can all... that's just... oh, God. The cope is just ridiculous. Ridiculous. This just goes to show. This is just happening in New Zealand as well from the news yesterday. They're having to import coal and burn that again because there's not enough electricity in the grid. And that's before the EV transition has really happened. So God help us when it does, or if it does. Anyway, that's it for this one. Really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye for now.